Okay. I hear an echo. Echo scares me. Well, I am glad to be here today, and I'm really glad to be with all of you today. My family, I don't know where they went. I have a wife. There's my in-laws. Most of you may not know that Larry Allen produced such a beautiful offspring that I had to marry her. So Larry Allen is actually my father-in-law. My wife is up there with my little girl now, the little boy. Got a brand new boy, just turned 9 months old yesterday. And so I am excited. I love life. I love it with everything inside of me. And I got involved in doing what I'm doing now because of a wonderful liberal Democratic senator who convinced me that I needed to be involved. I'll never forget, back in 2008, I'm sitting on the couch watching television, and Senator Durbin and all the Democratic senators decided that they needed to call the executives of the oil companies or the oil companies to come and grill them while the gas prices are so high. How many of you remember that? And I'm watching Senator Durbin. I'm like everybody else. I'm raising a family. I have a small business. I don't want to be involved in politics. It's boring. It's too much work. People lie all the time. Why would you want to be involved? I want to watch college football. I want to go snow skiing in the wintertime. But when he started to speak, there's something inside of me that couldn't take it any longer. I think we're going to have to come down on the volume just a tad bit more of my guys up there. If not, I'm going to have to switch mics, I think. What he started to do was such a level of hypocrisy that it just burned on the inside of me. When he began to say to the oil exec company that day, "Have you no shame what you're doing to the American people? To the truck drivers, to the farmers, to the single home mom parent houses. Have you no shame?" And I'm sitting there looking at him like, I can't believe the level of hypocrisy. And I was further mad at the oil execs who didn't have enough backbone in them to stand up to it. Because number one, the oil companies are one of the few businesses in the world where the very product they dig up out of the ground, they don't set the price of. It's traded on the commodity market. Second of all, if you don't know this may shock some of you, the federal government makes more in tax revenue in the production and selling of gasoline than the oil companies make in profits. So that day, my heart was just fluttering. I realized that I was being pushed to a change in my life, and I wasn't sure what I was going to be, but I called up my father-in-law and said, "Would you like to go to the mountains and let's do some research?" We love going to the mountains, and I said, "Let's just go up there for 4 or 5 days by ourselves, and let's get on the internet, and I'm just going to start studying. I want to know for myself." And so I started studying, and I just started all kinds of taxes. I studied the tax issue, how much we pay in taxes, and how many different kinds of taxes we pay. In fact, I was blown away that there are cities in Colorado and in Philadelphia, or Pennsylvania, that have a thing called the occupational privilege tax. Now, don't confuse this with the income tax that you'll have to pay from your paycheck. Don't confuse it with the sales tax that you pay when you buy something. Don't confuse it with the property tax that you pay on the house that you just purchased. What this is that the king of that county and that city have said, if you want to work in our location, you must pay an extra tax. It's a privilege to work here. In fact, when the Atlanta Braves go and play the Phillies, they have to pay a tax because they earn income that day. And so a lot of baseball companies just said, "Hey, we're not going to go play in your town anymore." Every single time there's an economic need, what is the first response by those in government do? Raise the tax. They are just so dumb. I hope before we finish today that I explain to you in a very logical way why Ronald Reagan had it right. And I tell you the truth, in all of the things that I imagined in my life, I never once imagined that I would share the stage with Ronald Reagan. Not one time. But I am glad. When I was young, I used to watch him as 8 and 9 years old, and I grew up in a very bad environment. My dad, my original dad, came back from Vietnam. He became really famous. I was told he became on the FBI's most wanted list. My mother was mentally insane. I was in foster homes, reform centers, later jail. But at the age of 16, I met a man who changed my life forever, and that man's name is Jesus Christ. And so that is the passion that drives me in everything I do. And so some of you may not have a religious following here, and that's okay, because we're here for one purpose, and that's the purpose of patriotism, bringing back the foundational fabric of our Constitution, and that's what I fight for. Out of all of that research, not knowing what I would do, hey Eric, could you bring me a book? I had a book with me forever, and it didn't follow me up here for some reason. But I wrote a book called No More Secrets. How many of you ever have seen the movie Sneakers? One or two? Go read the movie, go buy it. It's a wonderful movie. And that's where the concept of the name came from, No More Secrets. Basically, what I realized in talking with friends and family members, thank you, this is my brother, was that so much of what comes out of Washington, D.C., particularly the lies, the one-liners, the statements made by the Democrats and the liberals, to try to convince you that you need to allow them to do what they want to do, is because we don't understand some basic fundamental concepts of economics in our country. And so my goal was, how do I reach en masse the American people? Because they're not going to read a 300-page book by Thomas Sowell. Some of you here probably wouldn't read a 300-page book by Thomas Sowell. Mark Levin, who wrote a wonderful book, only sold, I think, like 2 million copies or something, out of a nation of 300 million. They're just not going to read it. So I wanted to create something that would take 30 minutes, that would so impart a philosophical concept in your mind that every time you heard of a bill or you heard of a politician promise you the moon, you would filter through this. And it's full color, 64 pages front to back, with lots of pictures. Lots of pictures to interest people who don't want to read all 64 pages. And so today at midnight, I said, man, I want to change my mind on what I want to talk about today. And I hate doing that because I like to turn things over. So I'm going to split up my speech in two different concepts. Number one is about liberty. Number two is about principles of this book, primarily because of what's happening in Washington, D.C. this week with the budget battle. I am a heavy drinker, so I'm going to drink some water from time to time. You know, today, sitting over here, and I went with my father-in-law, we went to Arizona a couple of weeks ago to the Tea Party Summit meeting in Arizona. There's just something that just stirs on the inside of you when you are with like-minded people. There's something that feels good here today about being with people who understand where we are in our current crisis. And I say a crisis because there's a crisis economically, there's a crisis with losing our liberty, there's a crisis with the very foundation that most of you here, if you're 50 or 60 years old, you enjoyed rather well over your lifetime. But the new generation, the one that's rising up today, the one that's coming out of high school and college, they're coming into a crisis that they don't even recognize or see, because quite frankly a lot of them are really caught up in the entertainment aspects of life. But those of you who are here today, you're here for one reason, because you see it, you recognize it, you see in the distance of the horizon a battle that is starting to brew to take away our rights and our liberties. What exactly are we witnessing? Quite frankly, I believe we're witnessing the complete failure of the United States of America. We are witnessing the demise of free speech, the freedom of religion, the right to privacy, and the right to property, including one's own wealth. We have a president who will bow down before foreign leaders out of respect, he says. And I honestly can respect that. But when you go to a religious American university and you ask them to cover up the symbols of their religious belief system, I have a problem with that. I have a problem when a president will say, I will respect the foreign leaders of the world, but not the citizens of my own country. We have a president who stood before his very first G8 summit meeting and declared to all those around the world that you and I, the citizens of the greatest country on planet Earth, are arrogant. He made this statement despite the fact that we Americans give more money voluntarily out of the goodness of our hearts than the whole of the European community to bless people in foreign countries. We have a president in the first week of his office, during the great economic collapse of 2009, issued a memorandum, his second day in office. He issued a memorandum that says your last paycheck dollars must go to provide abortions to women around the world. We have a government that has created standards to take pictures of your naked body, that's now saying you must have this picture taken when you go to an airport. But now they're pushing it to buses, to trains, and to courthouses. And if you refuse, they're allowed to detain and or arrest you. We have a government that requires you to obtain a license if you want to carry a gun. But now they're saying, just in the last couple of weeks, that information isn't private. That they have the right to hand it over to newspapers like the New York Times that published all of the gun owners in New York. And now they're trying the same thing in Illinois. So see, the right to privacy is only a right when it suits those in power. This is because they no longer respect the Constitution of the United States of America. The President took an oath to defend the Constitution, but now he is leading elected officials down a path of abuse of power, but by not upholding the laws as required by the Constitution. We have a President that, when ordered by a federal judge to lift the ban on drilling in the Gulf Coast, completely ignored the order. Just said, I'm not going to do it. Now you and I are paying millions of dollars in tax money because a future court ruling said the President is in contempt of the court. He has hurt the economic activity of the fishermen and of the oil wells, and we have to pay millions of dollars for them. When a judge ruled that Obamacare was unconstitutional and the President's attorneys agreed in court that his order would be obeyed, they left the court and simply ignored the ruling. The President recently declared that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional in his thinking. He just says, I think the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. And therefore he ordered the Justice Department to no longer prosecute those who are found guilty under that act. We no longer have a president as an elected official who represents you and I under the watchful eye of the Constitution. What do we have? We have an American dictator. By his leading, other district attorneys around the United States of America are no longer prosecuting cases that they personally don't agree with. In San Francisco, in a festival called Leather Week, where homosexuals will have lewd acts in the public of things that I'm not going to mention here today, but your mind can be wild and imaginative, that when they are arrested and taken before the prosecuting attorney, he just rips up the arrest warrants. Because he believes they have a right to their lewd acts in public. Rule of law is being destroyed by those in power for the sole purpose of progressing a political agenda that they know the American people, you and I, would never vote for. Without leaders obeying the rule of law, which is their legal and moral obligation, it sends a message to the whole of America that none of us have to. I ask the question, are we heading to another civil war? Not one so much of guns and blood, but of a legal civil war. We have a whole class of citizens, about 15% of them, who no longer believe that they have a right to obey the law if they disagree with it. And they are in power. They are district attorneys and mayors and city council persons. They are now being told by the President, if you don't believe in it, you don't have to prosecute it. What would have happened if our mayor just said, you know what, I don't believe it's constitutional that you should have a license to carry a gun. So I'm going to call the sheriff up and say, Sheriff, no longer prosecute anybody when you find them without a gun license. What would happen if the corporations just stand up one day and say, you know what, I believe that the amount of taxes we pay is unconstitutional, therefore we're not going to pay anymore. What would happen if governors just started taking it upon their own selves to determine what is constitutional or not? We will break down into a civil war. The very single most needed ingredient for a government to survive, whether that government be socialism, communism, republic, or democracy, it must be that the rule of law be followed. If you don't have the rule of law being followed, you no longer have a form of government, you have anarchy.